Jenna had always loved the quiet of being home alone. Her parents were gone for the weekend, leaving her to relax in the small house they had lived in for years. It was a Friday night, and Jenna had settled on the couch with a blanket and her laptop. The house was still, except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the wind rattling the windows. Around 10:30 p.m., she decided to get a snack from the basement. The staircase creaked as she descended, and the faint light from the hallway barely illuminated the first few steps. Jenna flicked on the basement light and froze. It was already on. She hadn't left it on earlier, she was sure of it. The bulb flickered slightly, casting shadows that twisted along the concrete walls. Her heart began to race, and she whispered to herself that she must be imagining it. Maybe she had forgotten to turn it off last time. As she stepped further in, she heard a soft shuffle behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. The house was empty, or so she thought. Her dog, usually calm when she went down, began growling low in the living room above. Jenna swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she reached for a soda on the counter. A sudden bang echoed through the basement, like a box falling across the floor. She jumped and nearly dropped the can. Her breathing became shallow. The light flickered again, and for a moment she thought she saw a shadow move across the wall. She froze, telling herself it had to be the wind or her imagination. Then she heard it, a whisper, soft and raspy, coming from the corner of the basement. "You shouldn't be here." Jenna's heart raced as she scanned the dark corners. The shadow shifted, just out of reach of the light. She dropped the soda, which shattered on the concrete floor, and bolted up the stairs, heart hammering. Once upstairs, she locked herself in the kitchen and called 911, explaining that someone, or something, was in her basement. Officers arrived within minutes, searching every corner. They found nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, no sign of anyone having been there. Jenna never went down to that basement alone again. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of light reminded her of that night. The most terrifying part wasn't the noise, the shadow, or the whisper. It was the feeling that someone had been waiting for her, patient and silent, in a place she had always thought was safe. That night left Jenna with a permanent unease whenever she was home alone. Even years later, she hesitates at the basement door, afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Evan was 16 and home alone one Saturday evening while his parents went to a charity gala. The house was quiet, and he enjoyed the solitude, playing video games with headphones on. Outside, the sun had set hours ago, leaving only the soft glow of the streetlights and a chilly breeze rustling the trees. Around 11 p.m., Evan went to the kitchen to get a snack. As he poured a glass of water, a faint shadow caught his eye outside the back window. At first, he thought it was a tree branch swaying in the wind, but then he noticed the shape was distinct. A figure, tall and still, standing near the edge of the yard. Evan froze. The figure didn't move at all, but it seemed to be watching him, waiting. He blinked and it vanished. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, he thought, shaking his head. A few minutes later, the figure returned, closer this time, framed against the dim glow of the porch light. Evan's dog began growling, ears pinned back, hair raised along its spine. His heart raced. He hadn't heard the front door open, and the back door was locked. Someone shouldn't be there. He quickly locked all doors, grabbed his phone, and called 911. Whispering into the receiver, he explained that someone was outside, staring into his backyard. The dispatcher told him to stay inside, away from windows, and wait for officers. The figure stayed outside, motionless, for what felt like hours. Occasionally it shifted slightly, pacing slowly along the fence line, always stopping when Evan moved. He couldn't see its face, only a dark silhouette that seemed almost unnatural in its stillness. Suddenly the dog barked furiously at the window, and Evan noticed mud prints on the back patio that hadn't been there before. They led up to the edge of the yard and stopped abruptly, as if the figure had vanished into thin air. Evan's stomach sank. How had it disappeared so quickly? Minutes later, the police arrived. They searched the yard and the surrounding area, but found no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence, nothing. Evan's backyard was completely empty, except for the fresh mud prints leading to nowhere. Even after that night, Evan never felt comfortable being home alone. Every creak of the house, every rustle in the trees reminded him of the figure in the yard. He installed security cameras and motion lights, but the fear remained. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been watching him patiently, waiting for the right moment to act. Evan's story serves as a chilling reminder Even in your own backyard, the line between safety and terror can vanish in an instant. Being home alone doesn't always guarantee safety, and sometimes the most frightening intruders are the ones you never actually see. Claire was 17 when her parents left her home alone for a weekend getaway. She had spent the afternoon making plans for the evening. She would read her favorite thriller novel, sip a cup of tea, and let the soft strains of music fill the house. The quiet felt comforting, the kind of silence that promised safety. But as she would soon learn, silence can be deceiving. Around 10:45 p.m., Claire was curled up on her bed, her book open on her lap, when a faint rhythmic knocking echoed from the end of the hallway. Her eyes went wide. That was the door to the spare bedroom upstairs, the one her parents had locked months ago. Nobody had the key, not even the neighbors, and certainly not her. The knocking came again, soft but deliberate, like someone tapping impatiently. Claire's curiosity battled with a gnawing sense of dread. She rose cautiously, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor, and tiptoed toward the hallway. As she pressed her ear to the door, the knocking stopped. Then she heard it, a slow, dragging sound from inside, like heavy feet shuffling across the floorboards. Her pulse raced. She backed away and whispered to herself, trying to convince herself it was the wind or a loose shutter rattling somewhere outside. But instinct clawed at her, screaming that someone was in that locked room. She bolted back to her bedroom, grabbed her phone, and called 911, her voice trembling. The dispatcher's calm instructions did little to soothe her nerves. Stay in your bedroom, lock the door, and wait for help. Claire could hear the faintest creak of the floor outside her door. It wasn't random. It was slow, measured, deliberate. Someone was pacing, listening, watching. Minutes dragged on, each one stretching longer than the last. Then came a sudden crash, a loud bang from the locked room that made Claire jump so hard she nearly dropped her phone. Boxes toppled over inside, thudding against one another, followed by the return of the dragging sound, this time coming closer to her bedroom door. Claire pressed herself against the wall, gripping the phone like a lifeline, willing the police to arrive faster. Finally, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night, relief mixed with terror as officers arrived, their flashlights sweeping the hallway. They searched every corner of the house, checking the locked room with meticulous care, but the room showed no sign of entry. Boxes were in perfect order, floorboards were untouched, there was no trace of anyone outside her room. No footprints, nothing. Yet Claire knew what she had heard and felt. The low, deliberate dragging, the knocking, the ominous presence that had stalked her through the hallway. She could still feel it in the pit of her stomach. After that night, she refused to stay home alone. Every creak of the floor, every shadow along the hallway reminded her of that locked room and the unseen visitor that had known she was alone. She installed cameras, extra locks, even motion sensors, but nothing erased the memory of that night. The scariest part, Claire admitted, wasn't just the sounds. It was the knowledge that someone, or something, had been in her home, in a space that should have been inaccessible, and had known exactly where she was. Claire's story is a chilling reminder. Being home alone can feel safe, but the most frightening intruders are sometimes invisible, leaving only fear behind, a fear that echoes in the hallways long after they are gone. Nora had always treasured her solitude. One evening, with the house entirely to herself for the first time in months, she decided to indulge in a relaxing night. She dimmed the lights, lit a few scented candles, and curled up with a book in the living room. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, even the occasional creak of the floorboards felt oddly comforting. Around 11:15 p.m., Nora walked past the hallway mirror on her way to the kitchen, and that's when she saw it, a shadow. It flickered behind her in the reflection, distinct from her own movements. Her heart skipped a beat. At first, she laughed nervously, chalking it up to dim light and flickering candles. But the shadow lingered, moving independently, sometimes just at the corner of her vision. Nora froze, clutching her phone like a shield. She stepped closer, shining the light into the hallway. The reflection was empty. Only her own wide-eyed face stared back. She exhaled shakily, trying to convince herself it was nothing, but the sensation of being watched refused to dissipate. A few minutes later, a faint scraping sound drifted from the living room. Her cat, usually calm and affectionate, hissed and darted under the couch. Panic tightened around her chest. Whoever or whatever was in the house was moving silently, aware of her every step. She dialed 911, whispering frantically, explaining the shadow in the mirror. The dispatcher's calm voice instructed her to stay put, lock herself in a safe room, and avoid mirrors until help arrived. Nora obeyed, retreating to the bedroom, the candles flicker casting eerie shapes along the walls. The unease persisted. Then came the footsteps in the hallway, soft, deliberate, slow. They paused outside her door, a silence that pressed against her eardrums like a weight, then continued down the hall. Nora's heart hammered, each beat echoing the sensation of being observed, stalked, hunted by something unseen. When police finally arrived, there was no forced entry, no intruder, nothing. The mirror reflected only emptiness. But Nora knew the shadow had been real. That silent observer had been there, patient, waiting for her to notice. After that night, she never stayed home alone again. Mirrors became sources of anxiety. Even a brief glance down a hallway could set her heart racing. Cameras, locks, and alarms offered some comfort, but the memory of the unseen presence, glimpsed only in reflection, lingered. Nora's story is a stark reminder. Sometimes the most terrifying intruder isn't seen directly. Sometimes they are shadows, reflections, or sensations that seem just out of reach, hiding in the places we consider safe. The safest spaces, she learned, can harbor the most unsettling secrets. Olivia was 15 and enjoying a quiet Sunday evening at home. Her parents had gone out for dinner, leaving the house to herself. Music played softly through her headphones, a book rested in her lap, and the occasional snack reminded her that the world outside could wait. The house, old and creaking, seemed to breathe with her, the groans and pops familiar and reassuring, until they weren't. Around 10 p.m., while tidying up her room, she heard a soft, almost inaudible whisper, "Olivia." She froze, her pulse accelerating. At first, she convinced herself it was the wind or the old pipes settling, but the whisper came again, clearer and more deliberate, echoing from the closet where she stored her clothes. Her stomach knotted. She approached cautiously, her hands shaking, trying to convince herself that it was a prank or a trick of her imagination. With a deep breath, she flung the door open. Nothing. Hangers swayed slightly, but that was all. Relief was short-lived. The whisper returned, now accompanied by a slow, deliberate scraping sound at the back of the closet. "I see you." Olivia's blood ran cold. She backed away, grabbing her phone and dialing 911, whispering frantically that someone or something was inside. The dispatcher instructed her to stay in the bedroom, lock the door, and remain quiet. Olivia obeyed, pressing herself against the wall as minutes stretched endlessly. The whispers continued, alternating with soft scraping and thumps that echoed from the closet, each sound deliberate, as if mocking her fear. Her dog whimpered, pawing at the door, sensing something she couldn't see. Olivia clutched her phone, willing the police to arrive sooner. And then, a loud thump from the closet sent her heart into overdrive. Something had moved inside, though the space was empty. Whoever, or whatever it was patient, calculated, waiting for her terror to peak. When officers arrived, the closet was empty. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no intruder. Yet Olivia knew every sound, every whisper, every scraping noise had been real. She had felt it, been hunted by it, and it had known she was alone. After that night, she never stayed home alone again. Cameras, sensors, and locks offered some protection, but every creak, every closet door movement reminded her of that night. Even in broad daylight, closets felt like potential hiding places, filled with the unseen presence of that evening. Olivia's story is a haunting reminder. Sometimes the most frightening intruder is never seen. Sometimes they are heard, felt, and sensed in spaces we trust the most, waiting for the perfect moment to remind us of our vulnerability. If these stories gave you chills, imagine being home alone, thinking your house is safe, and feeling eyes on you from the shadows. Every creak, every whisper, every fleeting reflection could be real. Your own home can turn into a trap, a place where unseen visitors watch and wait. If you want more real-life horror that will keep you up at night, subscribe to Creepy McGee and turn on the notification bell, because you never know what might be lurking in the dark just beyond your sight.